For over 5 decades, Stallone has been the living face of resilience, the man who taught millions of people across every continent that defeat is only permanent if you stop getting up. With billion-dollar franchises, a fame that rivals gods, and a legacy that transcends generations, he became the ultimate embodiment of the American dream, proof that willpower alone can shatter any barrier. But behind that famous stone-cold expression and those unforgettable, guttural battle cries lies a story far more brutal than any script he ever wrote. It is a story not of triumph alone, but of a rejection so merciless it nearly erased him from existence before he even had a name. It is a story of a childhood marked by violence, systematic neglect, and a physical deformity that turned his very face into a target for cruel mockery. It is the story of 40 separate rejections before the world ever heard of Rocky of major studios offering him a king's ransom to disappear from his own creation, and of watching his legendary career collapse into public humiliation while the industry whispered that he was finished. Most hauntingly, it is the story of a tragedy so devastating that even his billions, his fame and his iron muscles could do nothing to stop it, the loss of his firstborn son. This is a wound that no script could rewrite, and no sequel could ever undo. The real fight Sylvester Stallone faced was never under the bright lights of a boxing ring or on the explosive sets of an action movie. It was in the mirror, in the suffocating silence of empty audition rooms, and in the unbearable grief that wealth and glory could never heal. This is the untold story of how the world's greatest symbol of strength was forged in the cruelest, most unforgiving fires imaginable. Sylvester Stallone's first battle began before he could even draw a breath. On July 6, 1946, in the crowded charity ward of a New York hospital, a series of mounting complications turned a routine birth into a nightmare. In the frantic chaos of the delivery room, a doctor used forceps with such violent force that they crushed the infant's tiny skull, tearing nerves and severing muscles on the left side of his face. From his very first second of life, the left side of his face was frozen into permanent paralysis. His lower lip drooped. His tongue was partially immobilized, and his speech emerged, slanted and slurred, almost incomprehensible to those around him. The doctor's apology was hollow, for the damage was permanent. Sylvester was marked as broken before he could even cry. His parents, Frank Stallone Sr. and Jackie Stallone, were a collision of volatile energies. Frank, a hairdresser with a temper as sharp as his shears, saw his son's disfigured face, not with a father's compassion, but with a cold disdain. Jackie, an eccentric woman obsessed with the stars and fame, viewed her damaged child as a personal embarrassment to her social ambitions. Their marriage was a relentless war zone where young Sylvester was nothing more than collateral damage. "I wasn't wanted," he would later confess in a rare moment of unfiltered honesty. "I was an accident they couldn't fix." The hatred his parents felt for one another bled into a systematic neglect of their son. By age 5, they had divorced, and Sylvester was shuttled between foster homes, relatives, and boarding schools, anywhere that would take the boy with the crooked face. School was not a refuge. It was a hunting ground. Children, with the natural cruelty of the young, pounced on his slurred speech. They mimicked his drooping lip and laughed at his garbled words, turning his physical suffering into their daily entertainment. Teachers looked right through him, assuming that a boy who could not speak clearly must also be unable to think clearly. He was labeled as slow, difficult, and ultimately hopeless. By his mid-teens, he had been expelled from over a dozen schools, not because he lacked intelligence, but because he was consumed by a righteous, burning rage. The boy who could not defend himself with eloquent words learned to defend himself with his fists. Every insult became a brawl. Every laugh became a declaration of war. He was suspended, transferred, and forgotten by the system. At 16, his mother sent him to a private school in Switzerland, primarily to remove the problem from her life. There, isolated in a foreign land and struggling with broken English, Stallone sank into a depression so dark he considered ending his life. He later admitted that he stood on the edge thinking about jumping, feeling utterly lost in a world that didn't want him. But something deep inside that damaged boy refused to disappear. It was a flickering, stubborn belief that somewhere beyond the cruelty there had to be a place where his existence meant something. He returned to America with no degree and no plan, carrying only a half-paralyzed face and a dream so absurd that he could barely whisper it. He wanted to be an actor. New York in the late 1960s was a city that chewed up dreamers and spat them out as statistics. Stallone arrived with $40 in his pocket and a single duffel bag. The auditions were a gauntlet of humiliation. Casting directors would take one look at his face and dismiss him before he could even finish a sentence. They told him he talked funny, that his face didn't work, and that he should find a different trade. To survive, he took the jobs no one else wanted. He cleaned lion cages at the Central Park Zoo, shoveling waste for just over $1 an hour, the stench of the predators clinging to his skin long after his shifts ended. He slept in the Port Authority bus station for weeks, curled on wooden benches using his thin jacket as a pillow, and waking to the boots of security guards kicking his feet. He sold his wife's jewelry, pawned his only clothes, and eventually reached a point of desperation so profound that it broke his heart. Standing outside a liquor store in the freezing New York cold, broke and starving, he sold his dog Butkus, his only friend in the world, to a stranger for $50, just so he could buy food. He later described it as the lowest point of his life, saying, "I didn't have a choice. I couldn't feed him, and I couldn't feed myself." But then, on March 24th, 1975, the universe shifted. Sitting in a cramped apartment watching a flickering television, Stallone saw Muhammad Ali fight Chuck Wepner. Wepner was a journeyman, a nobody, who was supposed to be knocked out in the first round. Instead, he lasted 15 brutal rounds, absorbing a punishment that should have killed a normal man, refusing to stay down even as blood poured from his eyes. In that moment of pure human defiance, Sylvester Stallone saw his own life. He stayed up for 3 days straight, typing furiously on a secondhand typewriter, pouring every ounce of his pain, his slurred words, and his invisibility into a script about a nobody boxer who gets one shot at greatness. He called it Rocky. When he finished, he had 90 pages and a tiny, flickering heartbeat of hope. He had no idea that this script born from the gutter would be his ticket to the stars, or that the world would try to rip it out of his hands before he could even start. Stallone clutched that Rocky script like a lifeline because he knew that if he sold it, he was selling himself. When the script started making the rounds in Hollywood, producers saw the genius in it immediately. They saw a gold mine. Within weeks, the offers started climbing $75,000, then $125,000, and then a staggering $360,000, an astronomical sum for a man who was literally starving. But there was a catch that was non-negotiable. Sylvester Stallone could not star in it. They wanted a real star, Ryan O'Neal, James Caan, or Burt Reynolds. They wanted someone with a face that worked and a name that sold tickets. They offered him a fortune to disappear and let someone else become Rocky Balboa. And against all logic, against the pleas of his wife and the advice of his friends, Sylvester said no. He was broke, he was unknown, and he was being offered enough money to change his life forever. But he knew a truth sharper than hunger. If he didn't play Rocky, the character would just be another Hollywood fiction. If he played him, he would be real because he was Rocky. He walked away from the money to bet everything on his own paralyzed face. The studio finally relented, giving him a mere $35,000 for the script and a shoestring budget to film it in 28 days. If it failed, his career was over before it began. Rocky was filmed in the biting winter cold of Philadelphia with borrowed cameras and a cast that worked for pennies. And in his first act of success, the moment he got his first paycheck, Stallone tracked down the man who had bought his dog and paid $15,000 to get Butkus back. He didn't care about the price. He just wanted his friend home. On November 21st, 1976, Rocky premiered, and the world was never the same. The low-budget film about a loser boxer exploded into a cultural phenomenon, earning over $200 million and winning the Academy Award for Best Picture. The invisible boy with the slurred speech was suddenly the most famous man on earth, standing on the Oscar stage, vindicated at last. The success didn't just open doors, it shattered them. Rocky 2, 3, and 4 followed, each one bigger than the last, turning the underdog story into a multi-billion-dollar empire. And in 1982, he introduced the world to John Rambo, a traumatized veteran who became a global symbol of rebellion and resilience. At his peak in the mid-80s, Stallone was the highest-paid actor in the world, a one-man industry who owned mansions, car collections, and the adoration of millions. But Hollywood is a place that builds icons only to take pleasure in watching them fall. As the 1990s arrived, the action hero era Stallone had defined began to grow cold. Audiences wanted irony and detachment, not the muscled sincerity Stallone offered. His career began a terrifying high-speed descent. Failures like "Stop or My Mom Will Shoot" and Judge Dredd turned him into a national punchline. His asking price plummeted, and the man who once turned down a fortune was now begging for roles in direct-to-video projects just to stay relevant. The industry whispered that he was finished. The same invisibility that had haunted his childhood returned even in the blinding spotlight of fame. Financially, the collapse was devastating. Poor investments and expensive divorces left him struggling to maintain the life he had built. In interviews from that era, you can see the light fading from his eyes. He thought the world had decided he was done. But Sylvester Stallone had been at rock bottom before, and he knew that the only way out was to fight. He didn't return with the flashy action sequel. He returned with a script that revisited the character who had saved him once before. He wrote Rocky Balboa, a film about an aging fighter facing his own mortality and irrelevance. It was his most personal work because Rocky's fight to prove he still mattered was Sylvester's own. And just as he was clawing his way back into the public's heart with the success of The Expendables, a blow landed that no script could have prepared him for. In July 2012, his oldest son, Sage Stallone, was found dead in his home at the age of 36. Sage was Sylvester's firstborn, the boy who had appeared with him in Rocky V, the son who shared his father's soul and love for film. The cause was a heart condition, but the details were irrelevant. His son was gone, and no amount of fame or fortune could rewrite that ending. Sylvester was shattered. He disappeared into a grief so total that many feared he would never return. He was the world's symbol of strength, but in the silence of his home, he was just a father who had outlived his child, haunted by the questions of what he could have done differently. But in a cruel, poetic irony, it was that unbearable weight of grief that fueled his greatest performance. When he returned as Rocky in the 2015 film Creed, playing a man battling cancer and haunted by his own ghosts, the emotion wasn't acting, it was survival. Every tear he shed on that screen was for Sage, for his father, and for the 40 years of rejections he had absorbed. At 69 years old, he did the impossible, earning an Oscar nomination and the respect of an entire industry that had discarded him. Today, at nearly 80, Sylvester Stallone is still standing. His body moves slower, and his face carries the map of a life defined by more pain than glory. But he refuses to stop. He has found peace in his marriage to Jennifer Flavin and his daughters, and he continues to work with the same stubbornness that saw him through the Port Authority bus station. He is the last of the Mohicans, a living testament to the fact that it doesn't matter how hard you hit. It only matters how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. The paralysis remains, the grief for Sage lingers, and the memories of the roach-infested apartments are still there, but so is the proof that he won. Sylvester Stallone is not just a movie star. He is the proof that the human spirit is the only thing that never truly has to lose. The legacy Stallone leaves behind isn't just a collection of DVDs or a box office record. It is the story of a boy who was told he was a mistake and decided to become a legend. It is the story of a man who sold his dog to eat and then bought him back for a king's ransom because loyalty matters more than money. It is the story of a father who lost his son and found a way to use that pain to inspire a new generation. Sylvester Stallone's journey is the ultimate Rocky story because it is real. He bled for every frame he fought, for every line, and he proved to the world that no matter how disfigured your face is, or how slurred your speech might be, you have a voice that deserves to be heard. As he looks out over his life from the summit of 2025, he does so as a man who went the distance. He didn't just survive the fire, he was forged by it. And as long as there is an underdog with a dream and a refusal to stay down, the name Sylvester Stallone will remain as a beacon of hope, the fighter who never ever stopped getting back up. The transition from the peak of his action star fame into the dark valley of the 90s was perhaps his most silent struggle. People see the bad movies, but they don't see the man sitting in a darkened room watching the trades declare his death while he still has breath in his lungs. They don't see the struggle to maintain a facade of the greatest when you are being offered roles that are beneath your dignity. Stallone's second wife, Brigitte Nielsen, and the high-profile tabloid drama of their relationship added to the sense of a man out of control, a king whose palace was crumbling. But Stallone's strength has always been his ability to internalize his failures and turn them into narrative fuel. When he looks at the cameras now, there is a depth of experience that wasn't there in 1976. There is the wisdom of a man who has lost a child and found a way to continue breathing. That is the real secret of his longevity. He never stopped being the underdog, even when he had hundreds of millions in the bank. He always found a way to be the man with something to prove. As he approaches the final rounds of his career, Stallone has become a mentor, not just to actors like Michael B. Jordan, but to anyone who feels like the world has moved past them. His success with Tulsa King on television proves that he can adapt to any medium, any era, and any audience. He has outlasted his rivals, he has outlasted his critics, and he has outlasted the very industry that tried to bury him in 2002. The granite jaw is still there, the rasping voice is still there, and the refusal to stay down is more powerful than ever. Sylvester Stallone is the living proof that your beginning does not define your end, and that even a broken boy from a charity ward can grow up to be the most resilient man in the world. The fire that forged him was cruel, but the result was a legend that will outlive us all. This is the truth of Stallone. He didn't just play a hero. He lived the life of one, and he has the scars to prove it. In the end, that is the only victory that truly matters. He went the distance and he is still standing.